This week, I'm going to show you guys how we successfully designed and manufacture one of my favorite builds of all times. And with a few simple tips and tricks down the line, hopefully by the end of this video, you will also be able to build an epoxy table successfully. It's obviously not that simple, but we are going to give you our most valuable insight of designing and manufacturing epoxy tables successfully. And you guys do want to stick around until the middle part of this video, because we got a really important announcement we want to share with all the hobbyists, the DIYers, and for all the people that wants to start the epoxy company but don't know where to start. Maybe you are a master already, but there might be some things in this project that you can take and learn from us. We are also continuously always seeking new methods, new techniques, speaking to new suppliers internationally, and see how we can better our methods and techniques of building epoxy tables. I honestly think that there's always room for improvement, and I currently think that the methods we are currently using is the absolute best. But I can guarantee you that most probably by the near future, there will always be smaller things in our shop we will change just to make life easier for us and to make the design and manufacturing of building epoxy tables easier for us. And you guys do want to stick around till around about the middle part of this video, because there's a really important announcement we want to share with all the hobbyists, the DIYers, and for all the people that wants to start a company but don't know where to start. And you guys do want to stick around till the end to see how this masterpiece came out. Now, starting this week's project off, we are going to build something unique, something special, something the client asked us that they don't want a traditional epoxy rivet table. They wanted something different, something funky. And that's where the design part of this project was really tricky. I think we took, normally when we design epoxy tables, we will take around about half an hour to an hour to design the layout. We will send it to the client and they were happy with it. With this specific project, we took almost, I would say, estimate around about 3 hours just to design this table. And I honestly do have to say that this table came out absolutely stunning. The specific wood species we are using for this project is called Matumi, because we always get queries internationally for all the tables we build. People always want to know what wood species we are using. So it's called Matumi, and unfortunately for all the international viewers, this is only locally sourced from South Africa. It comes more from Tsenin world up all the way into Botswana, going up all the way into Africa. It's one of the most popular wood species to build epoxy tables in our country. And I honestly do have to say the design came out magnificent. Also, another tip I want to share with you guys, what I'm busy doing now, is something we normally don't record on video. And before you're going to place your slabs into the mold, always make sure to airbrush them to remove all the dust particles from your slab. Also, remember to wipe your wood off, because there will always be smaller dust particles that you need to remove before you're going to cast your epoxy. Now we're just busy placing all our pieces of wood into our mold we just built. And I know I'm most probably going to get some critics for this step, but we found in removing all the dust particles before we're going to cast our epoxy, we just use a leaf blower, because there's enormous amount of air that comes out that goes into all the small little cracks and holes that will remove the last dust particles. Now I'm just busy calculating the amount of epoxy we're going to use, and this was a really tricky calculation because there was a lot of bends, twists and turns, height differences, but at the end it's not that difficult of a calculation to make. It's really simple if you don't complicate things too much. It's a simple calculation of length times width times height, and I will go more into detail on this in the center of this video, where I'm going to do some more explanation on a epoxy masterclass we are presenting for people that wants to start building epoxy tables. Now I'm just busy mixing my part A resin and my part B hardener together, and it's quite critical to get your ratios absolutely 100%. You don't want a mistake at this part. Another tip I want to share with you guys is in mixing your colors. The specific client asked for a transparent blue color, and it's quite critical in each batch of epoxy you're mixing that you add the exact same amount of drops in to have consistent color scheme. Now I'm just busy testing out our new tool in our shop, and that is a vacuum chamber. And I honestly do have to say that this changed the way we build tables. This method is literally removing all the air bubbles from your epoxy. It was quite expensive, but definitely an investment for our company. Now, busy casting the epoxy, you will see as we cast more layers after one another, you will see the colors will become darker on the blue. And another tip I want to share with you guys, in when you're going to pour your epoxy, pour it on a ridge, on an edge of your table. This will prevent more air bubbles from coming out. And another tip I want to share with you guys is that when you're casting your epoxy, cast it slowly. And as you can see, my live edges on my slabs are not sealed. Now, the way we previously done it in the past is we would seal our live edges with epoxy. We will wait for it to dry. Then we will come and scuff it and sand it up. So when we're going to cast our epoxy, that the new epoxy we're casting will bond to the edge of our slab. But we stopped using that method, because if you think about it logically, we want the epoxy to penetrate into the wood. And thus is why we are using this method I'm currently using. We are using a deep casting epoxy, which means I can literally cast the full depth of this table in one go. But we still prefer to cast our epoxy in layers, which takes us round about 5 to 6 days. It's winter now, so it will take round about 6 days because the epoxy takes longer to cure. And this is a massive tip I want to share with you guys in casting the next layer. As you can see, the layer I'm busy tapping now is tacky. It's like a toffee, but it's still not a liquid form. And this is absolutely the best method we found in casting the next layer of epoxy. Instead of waiting for that layer to dry and sand it and then cast your next layer, we will wait for the perfect timing once the layer you just casted becomes tacky, that you cast your next layer. That bond between the two layers are absolutely the best bond you will ever get. So there's something I want to share with you guys, in something we've been working extremely hard on. And that is by compiling a complete epoxy online masterclass. We get so much queries internationally of all the methods we're using. People keeps on asking us sanding methods, polishing methods, everything regarding how to build an epoxy table successfully. So we took the liberty in designing and filming a full 3-hour online course, which you can watch in your own time, exactly how we manufacture and design epoxy tables. In this class, we are literally taking you by the hand and showing you from start to finish every single thing you need to know to build an epoxy table successfully. The course is 3 hours long. I am going to leave a link down in the description of this video where you can go to our website and where you can purchase this online epoxy masterclass. I think there's more than 1,000 people that already purchased the class, and we have so much positive feedback on people that started small companies. People that were so scared of working with epoxy that are so comfortable with working epoxy now. People that's making small chopping boards. People that's DIYists and hobbyists that were so afraid of working with epoxy, and now they are so comfortable with working with epoxy. Like I mentioned, this will literally show you every single thing in detail, how we manufacture and design all our tables. Check this ad out and you can decide for yourself if you want to purchase it or not. We've been building epoxy tables for many years now, and we are finally going to share all our methods and techniques with you. My name is Greg, and I am going to show you how to build the perfect epoxy table. I'm going to show you all the tools you need, exactly how to use them, and show you some tips and tricks down the line. Everyone thinks you need to cast your second layer of epoxy once your first layer has set. That's not true. You need to cast your second layer of epoxy once your first layer has become tacky. This masterclass has been designed for all woodworkers, from your beginner all the way up to your experts. Click on this video or in the description down below for more information. So the prices for the course will go up by next month, so you guys must probably have another week left. Then the course will double in price, so make sure you go and check it out before the prices go up. Continuing with the video, like I mentioned before, we are using a deep casting epoxy, which technically we can cast the whole table in one go, but what we found is that casting in layers, we are still using a deep casting epoxy, but casting the table over the course of say 5 to 6 days, casting a total amount of, depending on the thickness of the slab, we will cast around about five layers we will cast, and we found that this reduces the amount of bubbles we have. Remember, we don't seal our live edges, so you will always have small micro bubbles on the edge of your slab. This is why we cast in layers, because deep casting epoxy obviously takes longer to cure, and this helps us to remove 98% of all our air bubbles. Now, taking the table to one of our suppliers' shop, which he has a massive CNC machine. Now, we are obviously not in a position to purchase a CNC machine because it's truly really expensive. So for a small cost, we just take it to our supplier. It takes us around about 2 hours to flatten our table both sides, and this is the most critical step in making sure that you have a flat surface between your wood and your epoxy. Now, the way we previously done it, I think we only done it once or twice way at the start when we started manufacturing epoxy tables, is we would have done it manually with a router sled. Now, there's nothing wrong with it, but we found that it's so messy and it takes us just too much time in getting our surface flat, and that's why we don't waste our time anymore. We just pay the small fee, and doing it on a CNC machine is just way faster, and it saves us so much time in completing this project. Having the table back in my shop, we are going to start sanding with our Festool Rotex machine. in the Rotex setting. Now the Rotex setting is like a belt sander setting, but it's not as aggressive as a belt sander. This step is to remove all the CNC lines the CNC machine made. You will see on the table there's so many lines, and the 80 grit sandpaper is going to remove all those lines. This step is quite critical for the next step that's going to follow in our build. So once we completed sanding our complete surface of our table, you will see there's obviously still some lines only on the epoxy sections. On the wood sections, it's totally flat. There's no CNC marks. You have to come with your airbrush and remove all the last dust particles in all the small little cracks and holes. Then we're going to mix a separate small batch of epoxy, because 90% of all the slabs we receive from the kiln dry is really dry. I would say it's around about 10% in moisture, and this means that there's a lot of cracks that occurs in the wood, and we obviously have to close this. Now this is where the next step is quite crucial, because you do want to close all that small little cracks and holes and imperfection on the top and the bottom of your table. It's quite critical to finish the bottom of your table exactly the same as your top of the table, because the client obviously pays premium prices for the table, and you don't want to give him something that you haven't done in a perfect way. So this step is number one, to close all the small little cracks and holes. And I'm putting a very thick coat of epoxy on, because I want the coat of epoxy to penetrate into the wood. This is also going to help to seal the wood long term if the wood decides to shrink or expand in different climate situations where the table is going to be. We haven't done this step previously, but we found this seals the wood, and it's definitely going to prevent the wood from moving if there's a very thin layer that's going to penetrate into the wood. And you will see once you're going to apply your layer of epoxy over the complete surface of your table, you will continuously have to come back and close the small little cracks and holes, because the epoxy is going to penetrate into that crack, and then you're going to have to come and fill that crack afterwards. And so for the holes as well. This is quite crucial in your build to get the perfect surface and to get the perfect finish at the end of your project. So once we are done with this step, we will leave this top coat of epoxy for around about 2 days to give it time to penetrate into the wood and give it time to get extremely hard. Now it's also important to know that the epoxy we're using, that we casted the table, and the epoxy we are using now to apply the top coat is 2 different types of epoxy. If you are going to use deep casting epoxy for this top coat I'm applying now, you are most probably gonna wait 3 to 5 days for that epoxy to cure, because deep casting epoxy is not designed to be casted in a thin layer. It's designed to be casted in a thick layer. That is quite crucial. And as you can see, I am busy closing all the small little cracks and holes, because the epoxy keeps on going into that cracks, and this is quite an irritating step, and you have to start this in the morning, because you're continuously going to come back and fill that crack. Otherwise, if you're going to do it just before you go home, you'll come back the next day and you will find that that crack is still open. And it's also quite crucial to come with your gas torch and torch all the small little bubbles that will occur once you're going to apply this thin layer of epoxy over your wooden section of your table. Moving to the next step in our project, and that is by cutting our table down to its final size. Another tip I want to share with you guys in when you're designing and building your table, always build it slightly bigger lengthwise and widthwise, because you don't want to build a 2.4 meter table and then you're gonna have to cut it down slightly. This is dumb if you ask me. So once you cut your first line on the longer edge of your table, we will take that measurement and copy it to the other side to make sure that the two longer sides of our table is exactly parallel. And then after, we will come and square the smaller edges of our table off with a square. This is quite crucial. Don't start with your smaller edges of your table. Always start with the longer edges. We found that previously we done a table and we started cutting the shorter edges of our table and we struggled to get the table square. So start with the longer edges of your table. And for this step, I am using my HK85 track saw. And as you can see, I must probably got like 10 to 15 more left on the thickness of my table, which meaning my table was a total of 60 millimeters thick. Moving to the next part in our project, and that was to mark for the steel base, to fasten threaded insets from the underside. And this is also a crucial step. Don't use screws or anything to fasten your steel base to the underside of your table. Just use threaded insets. It's really easy to insert them. You can buy this online. I think we literally only have 1 or 2 shops in South Africa that sells decent threaded insets. Moving to the next part in our project, and that is by giving our table on top and at the bottom a small 45-degree chamfer. Now we really try to keep this chamfer as small as possible because we do want to keep the thickness of the table. We don't want to go and cut too bigger of chamfers because I feel it takes away from the thickness of the table. And another tip I want to share with you guys in when you're going to router your edges, sand your table up to 180 grit, then you come and give your table a chamfered edge, and then you continue sanding your table, because you will see the router will obviously make marks on the epoxy section of your table, and the bearing of the router will make a small little groove on the side of your table. A groove, not deep, it literally just makes a line that you have to come and sand afterwards. This is quite critical. We found that when we sand it into high grits, it's difficult to remove the marks the underside of the router makes on the epoxy section. The next step in our project is to continue sanding. Now, this is also a very crucial part in which oil you're going to end up using for your table. If you're going to use Rubio Monocoat, you can only sand your wooden section to 180 grit. Now for us, we are using Odie's oil, which means we can sand to any grit our heart desires, which means that we can sand our wood and our epoxy to 400 grit. And the reason we are sanding to 400 grit sandpaper is because we want a frost smoky finish on our table. If we are going to do a high gloss finish, we are obviously going to sand all the way up to 1500 grit. And the last step before we go into oil is just to give our table a good clean. Now I am using my polish machine. Now trust me, this is not to polish the table. This is just to remove that last white dust particles the sander makes. And this is quite crucial, and we found that this method is the best method in removing the last dust particles. Apologies. The last step before we go into oil, we are going to add our signature to our tables. Now, we are super proud of our brand, and as you can see, it's obviously not DIY with Greg. We actually do have a custom fabricator company called Craft House, which we focus on bespoke, luxury, handcrafted South African furniture. Now, this is the part I want to show you guys. We are using Odie's oil, and we will start with the Odie's oil Super Duper. And we did add a little bit of the espresso powder, which will make the oil slightly browner. Now, the reason why we do this is we want to remove most of the yellows in the wood. And we will typically start with the Odie's oil Super Duper. We will use a very old sander on a low RPM, because the vibration of the sander massages the oil into the wood. We love this step. Once we applied the first coat of oil, we will leave our table for around about 1 to 1.5 hours. Then we will come and buff the oil off. Coming back the next day, round about 24 to 30 hours later, then we will come and apply the original Odie's oil. We will leave it for 1 hour, and then we will come and buff it off. Then we will leave the table for another day or two and give that oil enough chance to penetrate into the wood. And we will repeat the same process for the underside, obviously. Now, I know it takes us a total of around about 4 to 5 days to oil our tables. I know this is long, but we love using Odie's. It's absolutely our favorite oil we like using when we building epoxy tables. And if I can advise you guys, if you are not using Odie's, just give it a try. Now, we are not sponsored by them, but we just love using the oil overall. And just see how this epoxy and the live edge on the inside just pops when we're going to apply this oil. It's absolutely beautiful. Now, before I'm going to leave you guys with the final product, I have to ask you guys, if you enjoyed this video and you enjoyed the content and you did learn something new from us, give this video a thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Make sure you leave a comment down below. What do you think of this table, and what would you have done differently? By subscribing to our channel, it's honestly just helping us to grow and helping us to produce more content for you and for everyone out there that wants to build DIY projects and help you guys in building them successfully. I hope you guys enjoy the final product, and make sure you check out our online epoxy masterclass, and you guys can also go and follow us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and sorry, we don't have TikTok. We had TikTok, but not anymore. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'll see you next week with another super cool project. Thanks guys. Cheers.